Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to share the latest progress of HPMP Stage 2 in Oman with all of you. You may know that the Stage 2 of HPMP for Oman was approved at the 7th FAO ESCOM meeting and covering the period of 2016 to 2020, with the reduction target of the 35% of HFC consumption by 2020. And the target so far was already achieved by the government of Oman. You can see from the chart that the HFC consumption in 2020 is about 16 ODB tons, which is much lower than the control limit. And so far in the country, only HFC 22 is still consumed in the air conditioning and the refrigerant servicing sector. How we can reduce and eliminate the HFCs in the country? Firstly, we have a look at the life cycle management of the refrigerants. Actually, for Oman, no refrigerants was produced in their country. All the refrigerants were imported from outside of Oman. And also in the country, no manufacturing sector consuming their HFC in their country. So therefore, the import refrigerants will go to the servicing workshop. There are also another way that the refrigerant can enter the country. For example, the refrigerants can enter the country through their equipment containing their HFCs. For example, the air conditioners containing their HFCs. And then this equipment will go to the end user. After the service life or there's some problem, the end user will send the equipment to their servicing workshop for repairing and also maintenance. And then the equipment will be sent for the final disposal. This is the life cycle of the refrigerants. How we can design some activity to reduce and eliminate the refrigerants? There are several ways. Regarding the import of the refrigerants, we can issue the quota and develop a licensing system to ensure the government of Oman can monitor and control the import of the refrigerant. At the same time, we also can provide the training to the customer officers to enabling to identify those refrigerants from the customer. Secondly, in the servicing workshop, we can promote recycling and recovery and the reclamation of the refrigerants. We also can provide the training and certification system to the technicians. So later on, I and also the colleague from UN Environment will introduce more regarding these two technical assistance. Thirdly, regarding the end user, we can improve their awareness on the refrigerants consumption in their equipment for the end user. But also we can provide the technical assistance and, for example, the zero leak program to avoid the refrigerant emission to the air. And also for the final disposal, we also can conduct some activities to dispose the refrigerant in an environment sound manners. Except for that, after the country, after 2030, when the country totally ban their HCFCs, we also can propose other activities. For example, training their customers to ban their import of the equipment containing HCFCs, as well as green procurement and the labeling the refrigerants in the products and so on. What we propose and do in the HPMP Stage 2 in Oman, actually there are three components, including the first one, updating policy and the regulation. So far, under this activity, in cooperation with UN Environment, we develop a quota system together with an e-licensing system. It's called Bayan system. And also we provide the equipment, for example, identifiers to customers and also the trainings to the customer officers to monitor the import of the refrigerant. The second component is a technical assistant to the servicing sector. There are basically three group of activities. The first one is regarding the national certification and trainings. So my colleagues from UN Environment will give more information regarding this group of activities. The second one is technical support to larger end user in the fishery sector. This is what we are doing today, but also we do some study regarding their alternative technologies. We will share the key findings with all of you. The third group of activity is regarding the recovery, recycling, and the reclamation program. I will give more information later on. The third one is implementation and monitoring. From UNIDO side, we support the government to verify their ICFC consumption from 2016 to 2020, and keep the information shared with their metropolitan secretariat. So now I would like to give you more information regarding the recovery, recycling, and the reclamation program. What the 3R program? Actually, recovery is a transfer the refrigerants from the refrigerant system to external container. Recycling is charge the refrigerant back to the refrigerant system for reuse. And the reclamation is reduction of the contaminants to the level of virgin refrigerants. So why we will do the 3R program? Firstly, refrigerants are not consumable in the system. So that means after the several years, when you use the equipment containing the refrigerant, this refrigerant is still there. So therefore, you can, when you replace the equipment, you can recover the refrigerants from the system. Secondly, regarding to requirements of the Montreal Protocol, after 2030, the country is not allowed to use the refrigerants anymore, except for a small percentage of servicing tail. How those the existing ODS-based equipment can run? So the 3R system is a legal source of the refrigerants could maintain the inventory of the existing equipment until their end of the life. Thirdly, also it's very obviously, when we do the 3R program, we will reduce the use of the virgin refrigerant, and also we will avoid the release of the refrigerant to the air. In this slide, I will give you more information how to do the 3R program. You can see that the virgin refrigerants is here and sent to the servicing workshop. When the equipment, for example, refrigeration, we need to charge the new refrigerants to the system, and the old refrigerants will be recovered and then sent to the equipment for testing, and then decide where we can do. If the refrigerants can be recycled or could be further reclaimed. The reclaimed means we will remove the impurities from the refrigerants, including those oil, acid, and water, and the particles, and the others. Then the reclaimed refrigerant will be sent to the laboratory for test. When they meet a certain standards, this can be given a certification. That means the refrigerants can be reused as the virgin refrigerant. So what we have done in Oman during the IPMP stage 2 regarding the 3R program. Firstly, we built up a national reclamation center based in the FH company. And also we built up to network into another company, Bahavin and Genesco. We provide a batch of the equipment to those companies to equipment them with the necessary infrastructure for the recovery and reclamation. At the same time, we also provide the trainings on recovery, recycling, and reclamation. You can see that last year we conducted 3 physical trainings in the companies. In addition, we also provide the test equipment, for example, a gas chromatograph and also analyzer to a university to verify the quality of the reclaimed refrigerant. So in the last 12 months, totally about 7,000 kilograms of the refrigerants were recovered in the country. And there are some also factors for a successful 3R program, including the legislation limiting the use of the virgin refrigerants in place, and also set up some national standards for recycling, and also do some capacity building regarding the trainings and provide the equipment to technicians to enable them to do the recovery, as well as the build up connection network and the paying system for the recovered refrigerants, and as well as the public awareness raising. So thank you again. Yeah, this is my presentation.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm very grateful for UNIDO and the NOU for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. I do believe that this workshop is very important and unique in nature. We don't have much workshops on the fishery sector, and I think this will add to the literature on the issue in the region. I opted to talk about certification of technicians, even though this is not directly related to fishery, but this will affect all working in the country, in the field. And I thought maybe it's time to give sort of heads up to the sector that certification will be a must in Oman, as we have been working on this issue with the government under the previous 2 stages as presented by my colleague Yuroi a while ago. Next slide, please. I won't talk much about the protocol and ozone protection, just a very quick overview that we are dealing with a protocol that aims to protect the ozone layer, which protects the Earth and life on Earth from the undesired radiation of ultraviolet rays. Next, please. The answer was Montreal Protocol and Vienna Convention. Both have been reached at after long discussions and negotiations at the international level. First with the Vienna Convention in 1985, which set the ground for international cooperation on protecting the ozone layer. And subsequently, after 2 years in 1987, the Montreal Protocol was signed with its 21 articles to provide details how the international community will deal with the protection of the ozone layer, meaning to provide the practical means and tools to achieve the desired phase out of controlled substances or substances that are responsible for destroying the ozone layer, including a financial mechanism, which was a unique of its nature. So far, 4 amendments took place under the protocol, and 1 adjustment in 2007 to control HCFCs, which we are operating according to since then to phase out HCFCs, including R22, which is the main substance in Oman. And recently in 2016, we had a breakthrough to adopt a new amendment on HFCs, which is called Kigali Amendment. Before you, the phase out schedule, according to the protocol, we have two time schedule, one for Article 5 countries, meaning for developing countries, including Oman, and one for non-developing countries. For Oman and other developing countries, we are, as per the adjustment of 2007, we are required to phase out all uses of HCFCs and R22 by 2030, and for that we have implemented already jointly with the UNIDO 2 plans, and we are fighting also to get the third stage of the plan approved by the end of this year to achieve this goal, while we have been successful in phasing out all other controlled substances. Next, please. The protocol is important not only from the environmental protection perspective, but it has also significant benefits at the health level, protecting millions of lives from the impacts of the ultraviolet, either on skins or immune systems, which resulted in also saving billions of dollars in treating such diseases. Next, please. In the States, only the estimation was, a saving of almost 8 billion from treating cancer, skin cancer cases between 2014 and 2007 and 2011, while so far since the inception of the financial mechanism of the protocol, almost 3 decades, all invested is for almost $4 billion US. So this is, a very successful investment with very rewarding payback. Next, please. Why you are here and why you are connected with the protocol? Because refrigeration, air conditioning is based on refrigerants, especially when we talk about conventional compression refrigeration system. You use refrigerants, R22 for now. And these refrigerants are badly ozone depleting substances. So the practice of the refrigeration and air conditioning, either during installation or production, installation, maintenance and service, will result in emissions to the atmospheres, leading to ozone depletion. And that's why the involvement and engagement, or positive engagement, of technicians and the servicing sector in general is very key, especially in countries where the main or the only consumption is in the servicing sector. So your participation in the efforts is key to achieve the desired objectives under the protocol. Next, please. Beside refrigeration and air conditioning, controlled substances are found, in other sectors like propellant, blowing agents for foam industry and foam applications, as solvents or cleaning agents, as fighting agents, and this is very popular application in Oman and the region, and as soil pesticide, but this is has been replaced by 2015. Next, please. Major step ahead Oman and other countries in the region is Kigali Amendment. Oman is not yet a party to Kigali, but we trust that this will be the case in coming few years, because this is the trend, and this is a must for all countries. They will be joining the amendment sooner or later. The Kigali Amendment is meant to control substances that used not to be controlled under the protocol, which are the HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, and the main substance under this family is R134A or R410A, which are very popular in your domain. These substances are not ozone depleting substances, but they have been used or phased in all sectors as replacement to control substances. Unfortunately, these have been contributing to or worsening the emissions affecting the climate, because they are very greenhouse gas, they have very high greenhouse gas potential. They contribute either directly through direct emissions from systems or indirectly through the electricity demand for operation of systems depending on them. Next, please. This figure shows the interactions between the ozone depleting substances, which are, most of them are having greenhouse gas potential, and the other substances which are not ozone depleting but contribute to the greenhouse effect, which are the HFCs subject to Kigali Amendment. Next, please. Why to create assessment and certification of technicians? Because we need to have a tool to organize the labor market according to the national qualification classification system, to ensure that emissions from practicing the refrigeration and air conditioning, either during installation or maintenance or service, are reduced. This is the main objective of the protocol, to minimize or eliminate the emissions to the atmosphere. So we need to ensure that there is a tool to monitor and control the practice in terms of limitation or elimination of emissions from of these gases. Also, to ensure a practice that takes into consideration energy efficiency practices. Legally, the GCC Council has approved what we called ODS Unified Regulations, where it was set clearly that all countries must adopt national regulations to establish and operate certification schemes to servicing sector, as well as to traders and or all other people or entities dealing with controlled substances. The idea was to minimize any possibility for unnecessary emissions of controlled substances, and thus achieve the objectives of the protocol. Beside the legal driver behind the establishment of certification scheme, there's also the market-driven, where competition between companies and manufacturers also push for better performance, and thus to ensure that technicians are having the highest qualification and skills to perform their job. Next, please. For us, we have been working with the NOU and the government of Oman to establish the required certification scheme. It has been very challenging over the past few years as it has its complexities and interconnections with other mandates, either with the previous Ministry of Manpower and currently the Ministry of Labor, and the industry, beside also the financial and organizational complications. Efforts resulted in developing a system that is agreeable and workable with the industry. However, the system is still awaiting final fine-tuning and thereafter the adoption and putting into operation in the country. We are expecting this to be the case during coming year. Beside the technicians and the service persons, we suggested that all traders and end users also receive sort of training and certification to deal with the refrigerants, especially after the introduction of the new long-term alternatives with their very specific characteristics, with many of them either flammable, toxic, or with high pressure. So we wanted also, beside ensuring the environmental benefits and objectives, to ensure the safety of operators and technicians. Next, please. As I mentioned, the system has been finalized last year, but the changes took place also last year in terms of restructuring of the government, and the Ministry of Labor took the lead now in initiating the system. The system is, or the scheme is being re-evaluated. And we expect to be adopted very soon. It is recommended that it will cover install, maintain, repair, recover, dismantle rack system containing refrigerants, and also with all traders dealing with the controlled substances. It is also hoped it will cover the informal sector in an attempt to also put sort of monitoring and control on emissions and practice by the informal sector. Next, please. Here you see the main elements of the proposed certification scheme, which is identical to any certification scheme adopted elsewhere, where we stand, or where we base the scheme on the national occupational standards, where Oman has long experience in developing those. Then developing of training regulations, followed by competency assessment tools, and accreditation of assessors. Assessors are a key element to ensure the successful implementation of the scheme. Without assessors, we cannot do assessment and certification. And then the assessment, for the assessment, you need also to have sound, well-equipped assessment facilities, and finally issue the certification according to a form agreed by the government. We suggested to have the certificate for 5 years for 3 categories, which covers all applications or all sorts of operations in Oman. Next, please. This is the workflow for applying for certification. We wanted to have the certification run online, avoiding the hassle with the bureaucracy, and only the assessment will be face-to-face. Otherwise, all steps from application to issuance of the certificate will be online according to the plan. Next, please. As I mentioned, the assessment centers are key for ensuring the successful implementation of the scheme. We propose to have the centers under the Ministry of Labor accredited for assessment. The program or the plan will provide required assistance to enhance the capacity and provide required equipment and tools to facilitate the assessment process. The plan also will provide initial support to ensure operationality of the scheme for at least the first 2-3 years. Then we think that the system will be self-sufficient and will run by itself. Next, please. I think I have covered this. We think that the certification scheme needs to be compulsory. No one can practice in the country without having been assessed and certified. Certification should cover all types of dealing with the refrigerants, either as technicians or as a trader or end user dealing with the controlled substances. This is not only, as I mentioned, to protect the environment, but also to protect the end user and the technician, especially when we deal with the harmful substances. Next, please. Thank you very much. And I'm stand ready to answer any question if needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome everybody. I'm not a stranger to Oman. I've been there a couple of times, so it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I've been working with UNIDO and UNEP on matters concerning the Montreal Protocol for a number of years now, and we are at the stage where the HCFCs are being phased out, and we're going into the next stage of the HFCs. So this project, that we are working on with my colleague Guillaume Cazor, is about assessing the emerging technologies and their suitability to the subsector, specifically the fisheries subsector. We will have an overview of the fisheries subsector, and so you can understand also the importance of the sector to the plan of reduction of the HCFCs. Also, this assessment that we have done has contributed with some recommendations for stage 3 proposal for Oman. As was mentioned before, the phase down, the phase out plan is in several stages, and each stage has its own some programs. So we were hoping that what we have contributed and as far as information will help stage 3. And in this respect, we have prepared a report, and the report has been reviewed by international experts. And one of the experts, my colleague and friend, Mr. Alexander Korpachai, is with us here today. He is with the Johnson Control, and we all thank him for his really valuable contribution to the report. Now, the objective from this workshop is to present the study and plus whatever you have seen so far, but also to get your input. So you'll get at the end the chance to talk. We'll not be talking all the time. And we're hoping that you can share with us your thoughts. And with this, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague Guillaume.
Thank you, Bassam, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. So I will briefly now introduce the legislation and policy of Oman in the field of ozone depleting substances. Next, please. So my intention is not to duplicate what has been already explained by Khaled, but just briefly. So Oman has ratified the Vienna Convention and the Montreal Protocol, including the London, Copenhagen, Montreal, and Beijing amendments, which regulates the production and consumption of ODS. The Kigali amendment is yet to be ratified. Maybe just one point, the Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol have each been ratified by 196 nations, making them the first universally ratified treaties in the United Nations histories. So due to its widespread adoption and implementation, the Montreal Protocol has been presented as an example of exceptional international cooperation, which even Kofi Annan describes as perhaps the single most successful international agreement to date. Thank you. Next, please. Yes. Regarding the legislation in place in Oman at the national level, so to fulfill its commitment under the protocol, Oman has issued special ODS regulations with a number of decisions on ODS control. Among relevant regulation, the licensing and quota system requires, since 2013, organizations and companies to register in order to be authorized to import, export, or re-import controlled quantities of ODS. This is the Ministerial Decree number 107, 2013. The Ministerial Decision 67, 2015 amends that decree and tighten ODS regulations applicable to organizations handling ODS. In particular, the establishment of new and the expansion of existing facilities using ODS is prohibited, and facilities for the maintenance, repair, and servicing of RAC systems containing ODS shall apply best available techniques and best environmental practice, including gas recovery, reuse device, and control of emissions of ozone depleting substances. As UNIDO explained, there is also an e-licensing system called BAYAN that has been in place since 2016, enhancing the control of ODS and contributing to ensure the country compliances with the HCFC phase-out schedule. The most recent regulation, next please. Yeah, the most recent regulation, Decree 59, 2019, adopts procedure for enhanced enforcement of the ODS regulations in key areas, particularly the ban on planting refrigerants into the atmosphere, establishment of mandatory refrigerants recovery and recycling, establishment of mandatory quarterly reporting on recovered, recycled, and reused refrigerants and stock of unusable refrigerants, and licensing of all entities handling ODS in the refrigeration and air conditioning sector since 2019. There's also a ban in this decree of pre-blended polyol into the country. The last pieces of regulation that I wanted to present is the Ministerial Decision 107, 2018, that adopt the standard from the Gulf Cooperation Council, from the Standard Organization of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Standard 2530 from 2016, that specify the energy labeling requirements and the minimum energy performance standards requirements for single package of various types of air conditioners and heat pump. So why is it important? Recent low GWP or zero GWP replacement technologies have enhanced energy efficiency, and their promotion can contribute significantly to the phase down of old and less energy efficient technologies, such as those using HCFCs and HFCs. Therefore, the adoption of development of alternatives can be encouraged and supported in Oman through development of energy efficiency standards similar to this one, the one from the Standard Organization of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Next, please. So now I will present some elements of the current refrigerant landscape and of the fishery sectors and the impact of on the environment. Next, please. So fishing is considered in Oman one of the oldest occupations. The fisheries in Oman have been dominated by small-scale fishing vessels and retailers. As most Omanis live in the coastal areas, fishing remains an important sector for the economy of Oman and play a vital part in feeding the population and providing employment. The sector provided in 2016 direct full-time and part-time employment to about 47,000 fishers, and another 80,000 individuals depend directly or indirectly on fisheries income. The combined agriculture, forestry, and fishing sectors' contribution to the GDP was 2.5% in 2019 and counted for 7.3% of its growth, excluding petroleum activity. So it's a sector that is growing faster than the GDP. We note, however, that the contribution to the GDP growth in 2018 is lower than the average of 15% in the previous 2 years. So there has been a bit of a slowdown. The sector is composed of 3 subsectors: small-scale and artisanal fisheries, which are fishermen operating small vessels, typically 5-9 meters in length, made of fiberglass or more traditionally of wood. I believe that's what is usually referred to as dhows. I'm not sure my pronunciation is correct, which are still in use in some regions of the country. Small-scale fisheries in Oman are characterized by a wide range of landing sites among the coastlines, a low level of capital investment, and labor-intensive production. Numerous species are harvested along the year based on seasonal patterns. Small-scale and artisanal fishers frequently lack bargaining power to influence market price, but also to invest in alternative technologies or in technologies even in general. We estimate that there were about 44,000 fishermen operating 21,000 fishing vessels in 2013. The second subsector is commercial and coastal fisheries, which comprise more recently developed coastal fisheries, longliners, and international contracted trawlers, targeting the higher value fish products. However, restrictions were imposed in 2011 by the government on these fishing trawlers in order to prevent overfishing and ensure a more sustainable environment for the fisheries. A new fleet of local coastal fishing vessels was since introduced and operated by local investors. Aquaculture, just can you move back to the previous slide? Quickly, yeah, aquaculture, this is the last subsector. It has been identified as one of the key pillars to diversify the economy. However, until now, it's still in its infancy in Oman, and the sector represented only 0.1% of the total fish capture. Next one, please. A few more information about the fisheries sector landscape. So in 2019, 95.7% of the fish capture in Oman was landed by traditional fishermen. So it's overwhelmingly the dominating sector. It's a level that is comparable to the one of 2011, but it is actually a bit below previous levels because from 2012 to 2019, traditional fishermen were responsible for 98 to 99% of the total fish landed. Before 2010, commercial fishing accounted for 10% to 20% of the total annual fish captured, but decreased significantly from 2009 to 2019. In 2019, we can see that most of the fish capture is actually pelagic fish, so those living in the pelagic zone. In 2015, 40% of the volume of fish captured in Oman was exported, so which is a significant proportion. It's mostly fresh fish to GCC countries and also small quantities of frozen fish to the US. The amount of fish landed in Oman has been multiplied by 2.7 between 2014 and 2015, and by 3.6 between 2009 and 2019. This increase is in line with the rise observed in the consumption of HCFC-based refrigerants, and this is something that Bassam will explain in more detail, and I hand over to him now.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. I'd like to talk now about the sector landscape in as far with some figures about the refrigerants and the refrigerant consumption. You were asked to participate in a survey, and we'll hear about the survey from Dr. Sabah Suleiman in a few minutes. But what I wanted to present to you here about the HCFC 22 and the fisheries, we found out that there are 173 pieces of equipment at 50 enterprises running on 22, using both reciprocating screw compressors and used in cold storage process and ice making machines. So we're just looking at the fisheries sector from the production part. We're not looking at the commercial part as far at this stage. We found that the estimated the refrigerant charge to be about 7 tons. However, the annual consumption of HCFC for service and maintenance is about 20 tons. This is almost 3 times what the average charge or the total charge that is in this equipment. It means that the equipment is being refilled 3 times a year. So the leakage rate is really staggering. It's very, very high. The other refrigerants, when 22 is not used, the other refrigerant is R404A. I remember in 2014, we talked about HFCs, and we said this is not the future, especially 404A, which has a very high global warming potential of about 4,000. It's even more than 22. So there are about 500 pieces of equipment, double the size of 22, and 437 of them are 404A. So there are some ammonia machines as well, which is encouraging. However, the leakage rates are similar. It's a little bit less, but they are not small. So the old equipment of 22 are leaking, and the new equipment of 404A are also leaking. So the total yearly consumption for all sectors, for all refrigerants, is about 50 tons. Now, this is alarming. Why? Because if, from the base year of 2009, 2010, from which the reduction of refrigerant was calculated, we have gone up 4 times. We are doubling in each 5 years. So it was 4 metric tons in 2009, 2010, and it went up to 8 tons in 2015 and to almost 20 tons in 2020. So the sector should be decreasing. As you have heard, the sector should be going down by about 35%. However, we see that we have quadrupled in the same period that we should be doing the reduction. So we'll talk about the technology and how to do that in the next presentation. And here I'll hand it back to my colleague, Guillaume.
Yes, thank you. I will briefly present a bit the impact on the environment of refrigerants. So maybe as to begin with, what is exactly ozone? So ozone is an isotope of oxygen with 3 atoms of oxygen instead of 2 in the oxygen. It's naturally occurring gas, which is created by energy radiation from the sun. It's pale blue, but that's not actually what gives it color to the sky. The greatest concentration of ozone are found between 12 and 50 kilometers above the Earth, forming a layer in the stratosphere, which is called the ozone layer. This layer is semi-permeable and protects the Earth by reducing the intensity of harmful ultraviolet B and C from the sun, allowing life on Earth and not only in the ocean. The amount of ultraviolet radiation that penetrates through the ozone layer decreases exponentially with the density of the layer. So when stratospheric ozone level decrease, higher level of ultraviolet reach the Earth's surface. Next slide, please. So let's now talk about ozone depletion. Some signs have been observed since the 50s, but it's only in 1974 that 2 chemists at the University of California published an article in Nature detailing threats to the ozone layer from CFC gas. At the time, CFC were commonly used in aerosol sprays and as coolants in many refrigerators. The 2 authors received validation in 1985, wherein a team of English scientists found a hole in the ozone layer over Antarctica that was later linked to CFCs. The hole is actually an area of the stratosphere with extremely low concentration of ozone, as we saw before, that reoccurs every year at the beginning of the southern hemisphere spring. You can see the evolution of the phenomenon on the small animation that for some reason is not animated. It actually also exists. Yes, it's moving a bit. Can you move back to that? Yes. It actually also exists above the Arctic. It's not only on the Antarctic, but it to a lesser extent on the North Pole. So with the phase-out measure from the Montreal Protocol, there have been signs of recovery in the last 2 decades, but ozone depletion is still a concern. For example, the 2020 Antarctic ozone was the longest lasting and one of the largest and deepest holes since the ozone layer monitoring began 40 years ago, but it was in this case driven by exceptional meteorological conditions, which are strong, stable, and cold polar vortex and cold temperature in the stratosphere. So that's perfect condition for ozone depletion. So what are the consequences of general ozone depletion? So the main concern regarding the ozone hole is the effects of increased surface UV radiation on human health, as we've seen before. So far, ozone depletion in most locations outside the poles has been typically a few %, and no direct evidence of health damage is available in most latitude, even if some studies found that the UV radiation reaching equatorial latitudes was far greater than expected with significant potential risks. If the high levels of depletion seen in the ozone hole were to be common across the globe, the effects could be substantially more dramatic, meaning that the negative effects on human health include increase in certain types of skin cancers, as Khaled presented it, eyes cataracts, and immune deficit disorders. UV radiations also affects terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, altering growth, food chains, and biochemical cycles. It will in particular damage the DNA plants, reduce photosynthesis, growth, and flowering. Aquatic life, in particular plankton, which are the basis of the food chains, is also adversely affected by high UV levels. Next, please. So how is the ozone depletion phenomenon taking place? So very briefly, ozone is actually a highly reactive molecule that easily reduced to a more stable form of oxygen, to the more stable oxygen form with the assistance of a catalyst. And the reactivity of ozone is due to its electron configuration in the valence shells, and chlorine and bromine atoms in particular have both the capacity to destroy ozone molecules through a variety of catalytic cycles. So in the simplest example of such a cycle, like here on this slide with R12, which is difluoromethane, which was a refrigerant of choice in fisheries, a chlorine atom is separated from the refrigerant by electromagnetic radiation, ultraviolet. The chlorine atom then reacts with an ozone molecule, taking an oxygen atom to form chlorine monoxide and leaving an oxygen molecule. The chlorine monoxide can then react with the second molecule of ozone, releasing the chlorine atom and yielding 2 molecules of oxygen. So that's how the ozone is destroyed. So, and what is really important is that a single chlorine atom can continue to destroy ozone for up to 2 years, resulting in 50,000 cycles. So as such, it's able to react with an average of 100,000 ozone molecule before it's removed from the cycle. So the overall effect is a strong decrease in the amount of ozone. Next, please. So many refrigerants, such as CFCs and HCFCs, damage the ozone layer, but some are also extremely potent greenhouse gases, as we saw before, meaning that they contribute to climate warming. The capacity of refrigerants or any other gas to contribute to climate warming is expressed through the global warming potential. So what is that? Global warming potential is a relative indication of the amount of heat that is trapped in the atmosphere compared to the amount of heat trapped by the similar mass of carbon dioxide. So it is expressed as a factor of carbon dioxide, whose GWP is standardized to 1. The GWP for R22, for example, which is very common in Oman in the fisheries sector, is about 1,800 times more than CO2. So 19.5 metric tons of R22, which is estimated to be the annual consumption of the fishery sectors in Oman, is equivalent to more than 35,000 tons of CO2. R404A, that the market is fast adopting in Oman, has a GWP of 3,922. So it's the highest of all commonly used refrigerants, and 30 tons of R404A are equivalent to 117,000 tons of CO2. If we combine the consumption of R22 and R404A, the total possible emissions, if all refrigerants end up in the atmosphere, is more than 150,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. So it's really consequent. But that's not all. So if you want to have a precise measure of the climate impact of your installation, you also need to take into account indirect emissions generated by the electricity consumption of the appliances. So in Oman, the average emissions from the electric production is 2 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt-hour. So the total equivalent warming impact is usually the index that we use to compare the global warming effects of alternative air conditioning systems, because it includes the contribution from the refrigerant, from the cooling efficiency, and the weight of the appliances. Next, please. I think that's the last slide on this presentation. Yes, thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. When it comes to fisheries sector and refrigeration in Oman, I want to start by asking you, what are the types of refrigerants consumed in surfacing in the fisheries sector in Oman? What are the most existing equipment based on the type of refrigerant? And what is the knowledge of the people working in the fisheries sector, their knowledge about Kigali Amendment, different types of refrigerants, hydrochlorofluorocarbon phase out and hydrofluorocarbon phase down? So why am I asking you these questions? Well, the goal of my presentation is to inform you about the results of the survey that I conducted in fisheries sector in Oman. And by the way, this survey was a part of the full study that was carried out for the sake of the preparation of Oman for phasing out of hydrochlorofluorocarbons in stage 3. In the procedure, the companies working with the fisheries sector in Oman were identified and contacted. And we have collected only around 50 companies. And for that reason, and to collect all the data from all these companies, a special survey was prepared and designed and sent to all these companies. And as I said, we received response from 50 companies. And the objective of this survey was to find out the consumption of hydrochlorofluorocarbons and their alternatives in the fisheries sector in Oman. And we have also designed the survey in order to find out the gender of employees, their knowledge about the Kigali Amendment, knowledge about Oman's reduction targets and schedules of hydrochlorofluorocarbon phase out and hydrofluorocarbon phase down. Also in this survey, we have asked the companies about their suggestions regarding other issues if they would like to add. This is the sample of the first page of the survey. And these are the remaining pages of the survey. I'm sure that the fisheries sector in Oman are familiar with this survey. The results of the distributed survey and the collected data were all analyzed and then organized in the form of tables and in the form of graphs. When the results of the survey of the fisheries come, we found that the majority of the fisheries companies were located in Al-Sharqiyya, and it was located in a place called Ja'lan Bani Bu Ali. And there we have found location of 11 companies. And we found also that the number of male employees exceeded the number of female employees. And we found this in all companies except one company is called the Far Fisheries and Food Industries Company. And also we found that the majority of companies working in fisheries sector in Oman lack or show a lack of knowledge about the Kigali Amendment, about the hydrochlorofluorocarbon phase out and hydrofluorocarbon phase down. Here you can see the results of the annual surface consumption of refrigerant in the fisheries in sector of Oman. And we can see that here, the refrigerant R404A was the most consumed type of refrigerant with a percentage of 50.8%, which makes up almost or slightly higher than the half of the total. And we found that R22 was remained in the use by fisheries by several companies with a percentage of 38.9, and then ammonia was the third most consumed type with a percentage of 7.8. We can see here the results of the equipment based on the refrigerants in fisheries sector. We can see that the equipment using the refrigerant R404A were the most one, with the percentage 66.1, and then followed by equipment using the R22 that came as the second most used one with the percentage of 26.2, and then the third most consumed type of equipment were based on using R134A with a percentage of 4.4. As a conclusion, we can say that the business of the fisheries sector in Oman depends mainly on refrigeration. Therefore, understanding the consumption of refrigerants and their types at the current state in the fisheries sector will help in future planning for the gradual decrease in the use of these refrigerants and try to find other alternatives for them. I mean, suitable alternatives in such a way transition from the current state to the final future state would go smoothly without affecting on the business of the companies working in the fisheries sector in Oman. Also, it's very important to raise the awareness among the employees, for example, about the Montreal Protocol, about Kigali Amendment, about more vocabulary in terms like hydrochlorofluorocarbon phase out and hydrofluorocarbon phase down. Ladies and gentlemen, that was what I wanted to share with you, and thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I realize we've been talking for like 1.25 hours. We have not given you the chance to ask questions. So, you know, hopefully we will be brief, and then the next phase is for you to talk. I realize we don't have many participants, but hopefully the participants with us would share some of their views. So the emerging technologies, and this was really the reason for our report. We have done a previous workshop in, I mean, UNIDO has done a previous workshop in 2014, which was targeted towards the technicians, and another workshop towards decision makers, and basically to tell them about the changing landscape of refrigerant and what is coming. In 2014, Kigali was not yet an amendment, but we knew that it was coming, and we did warn a little bit that you know, the trend towards going HFCs with high global warming potential, high GWP, was not the right trend to have in Oman. We have talked a lot about the Montreal Protocol, but I just want to tell you here that you know, the major takeaway is that there is no ideal refrigerant that fits all applications and has all the needed criteria. We'll talk a little bit about the needed criteria later now. Thanks to Mr. Alex Pachai for coming up with this version of the triangle. This is the refrigerant triangle for synthetic refrigerants. What we want to show here is that we are really trapped in this triangle. I use the word with a little bit of caution by saying trapped. The refrigerants synthetic refrigerants that we use today all lie within this triangle. What are the sides of the triangle? Is a hydrocarbon molecule, a chlorine molecule, and a fluorine molecule. If you go on the y-axis, if you go up, the ozone depleting potential increases because we are having more chlorine. If we go on the x-axis this way towards the fluorine, the global warming potential, the GWP increases. And as we go from the hydrocarbon towards the chlorine and the fluorine, the gases become more halogenated, their atmospheric life increases, and hence they hang around longer, or to deplete the ozone layer, or to actually to have a global warming effect. Toxicity is in this part of this, in this part of the triangle. And as you can see, flammability, as we approach back towards the hydrocarbon, then the refrigerant becomes flammable. So what are we saying? For synthetic refrigerants, they're either flammable, they have a ozone depleting potential, or they have a global warming potential. So we have to live. Ole Nilsson, who is the chief of the Montreal Protocol, said that several years ago. We have to live with flammability because we don't want ozone depletion and want to stay away from global warming. So we have to live with flammability. Now, this, what I call Back to the Future, for those of you who have seen the film, We started in 1834 with only natural refrigerants. There was ammonia, which was toxic, CO2, which had like high pressure and a bit difficult to work with, and the hydrocarbons, which were flammable. But they had no ODP and they had no GWP, ozone depletion or global warming. And then in the 30s, the industry needed synthetic refrigerants in order to come up with some refrigerant which were non-flammable, non-toxic, and easier with thermodynamic properties to work with. So the CFCs were introduced. But the CFCs could not cover all the uses. So the HCFCs, by adding a hydrogen atom to the mix, were introduced in the 1950s. And 22 actually is one of the most successful because it covered all applications, not only air conditioning, but also foam and aerosols and solvents. So it really solved a lot of problems. But in '87, the Montreal Protocol agreement came into effect, and we wanted to get rid of the CFCs. So some of the HFCs, like the 134A, were introduced, maybe 410A as well. And then by 97 and 2007, the amendments regarding the usage of the HCFCs, the world was turning more towards HFCs. And we saw that trend not only in Oman, but everywhere else, that we were going towards the HFC. And then in 2016, Kigali came into effect. Now, if we look, what is the selection criteria? We want a refrigerant that is non-corrosive, non-toxic, non-flammable, and non-ozone depletion or global warming. And we want to have a boiling point which is somewhere below the target temperature, and a high heat of vaporization, a moderate density in liquid form, and a relatively high density in gaseous form, as well as a high critical temperature. So you see the requirements are really quite a lot in this case. We also wanted to, so that's taking the thermodynamic properties and the environmental considerations into effect. We also want the energy efficiency, want the refrigerant to be energy efficient. But, TEEP has found out that the effect of refrigerant on energy efficiency by itself is about 10%. And here I encourage you to read the TEEP reports, which is the technology and economic assessment panel reports. We refer to them in the report, in the assessment report that the technology assessment report that hopefully you'll be receiving soon. We also want to make sure that the safety aspects are respected, that the charge limits for the certain flammable, for instance, refrigerants are also followed. But also we want it to be cost effective. I mean, you can design a refrigerant which is, has very good characteristics, but the cost becomes prohibitive, and maybe then the availability is affected by that cost. We also want to select a refrigerant which can be serviced, which is the serviceability of it is available in the country, but that can be dealt with through the proper trading. So we also want to look at standards. Standards here, the standards cover both the safety as well as performance standards. Also, the standards for the usage, the proper usage of the equipment. So you have, for instance, ISO 5149 and 817 about the classification of refrigerants. AHRI, which is the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, 700 standard 700 for the quality of refrigerants, and IEC, the IEC 60335 is actually dealing with the charge limits. You also have the same in ASHRAE, and you have the European standards as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about the emerging technologies. When we, here, this chart is a little bit old because you see some of the refrigerants are still in their experimental names. And now all of these have acquired R numbers, the ASHRAE R number, which makes them officially a refrigerant in the industry. So on the y-axis here, this is pressure. So on the, you have the very low pressure or the negative pressure, like the 123, which is used in centrifugal units. You have the low pressure, the medium pressure, where the 22 and the 404A4, which are mainly used in industrial refrigeration. 134A is used in commercial refrigeration and some of the cold stores. And then you have the 410A like pressures, which is higher than 22. And you see here on the x-axis are the GWP levels. So you have below the 675, which has been accepted now by the Montreal Protocol as a limit to deal with until we can move back to zero. I'm sorry, I didn't mention here that from the non-synthetic, you will find here the R290, which is a hydrocarbon, the ammonia NH3, and the CO2, which is on a pressure class by itself. So what do we see from this chart? We see that we have solutions almost in everywhere. What is interesting for the refrigeration, R410A is mostly used in air conditioning, some refrigeration applications, but for refrigeration, you're looking at the middle part here, and you see that you have three solutions. You have what is existing now, which is really high GWP, whether it's 404A or 407A. You have some alternatives that are in the medium GWP range of 1,000, like the 448A and 449. And then you have the mixtures and blends of R32 with HFOs or you know, R32 with the, so these are R32 with HFCs here in this part. While in this part here, R32 is introduced with the HFOs, which are the you know, which have double bonds and have lower GWP. Now let's talk a little bit about ammonia. Ammonia is you know, currently being used in over 90% of new industrial cold stores. It was used in the fishing industry before 1970, and then 22 came into effect. It can be designed for high efficiency, so it's a good refrigerant, and it produces high heat transfer coefficient, so it requires a low mass flow rate. So the compressors can be smaller, the equipment can be made more affordable, and it's at atmospheric pressure at -33. So for the use in industrial freezers, but also with some limitation. What is important about ammonia is that, you know, you have to avoid copper components because they corrode. You know, ammonia and water will corrode copper. And ammonia is flammable, but the flammability, the lower flammability limit is 16%, which is about 5,000 times higher than the short-term exposure limit, the short-term exposure limit for humans, and almost 50,000 times higher than the lowest level, which can be detected by smell. There were several incidents involving our, you know, ammonia, especially in Article 5 countries, and which resulted, unfortunately, in some fatalities. However, this can be avoided through proper system design and training and awareness. To continue on ammonia, a large industrial system running on ammonia mainly use evaporative condensers. These are the condensers with the water being sprayed on the coils. So you have savings up to 15% in energy over the traditional air-cooled system, which is mostly used for other applications. Seawater cooled condensers are used in Nordic countries, and cascade systems are used where you have two refrigerants, and we'll see that a little bit later, where the ammonia charge can be reduced and substituted with CO2. So instead of having all ammonia, you will have a cascade system with two refrigerants. There is also research about and experimental work about a smaller direct expansion, you know, rather than the flooded evaporator, and this reduces the charge of ammonia. Now, to talk about the main advantages and disadvantages of ammonia. So the main advantages is designed for high efficiency. It has high heat transfer, and freezers can operate at negative pressure. It is an advantage in a way that you're not having emissions, but a disadvantage is that it can draw gases, including water, in. The main disadvantages that we talked about are toxicity. However, you can smell ammonia and walk out, when it's needed. Flammability, we talked about that limitation, but we said it's a very distinct possibility, although accidents have happened. Also have higher compressor discharge temperatures. However, these can be, the heat can be removed by oil and the top cover cooling. Now, CO2 is not the other natural refrigerant which is used in air conditioning is CO2. And CO2 is not your usual refrigerant. It's low critical temperature of about 31 degrees. It means that it has, it can be used either as an subcritical at very low temperatures, or as transcritical, where the refrigerant is between the subcritical and the supercritical part. For low and medium ambient temperatures, it can be used in this transcritical, while for the low temperature, it's used in the subcritical. And it also can be used in two ways: either as a refrigerant, where it's compressed, or as a secondary fluid, where it's like brine. It's being used as brine or glycol. So in this sketch here, we have the different uses of different ways that ammonia can, that CO2 can be used. Now in sketch A, it's used as a secondary fluid. So the primary circuit uses another refrigerant like ammonia, and that you can see on the top of the sketch here. This is sent to a heat exchanger, where it exchanges heat with the CO2. In this system, the primary fluid is not circulated in the space, and this solves the problem of having the toxic fluid, for instance, or the flammable fluid going into the space. Now, sketch B here is a cascade system, and the cascade system is being used to bring the temperature down to very low temperatures of like -40 or below, which is used in fisheries. The system also uses two refrigerants. 744 is used to further bring down the temperature rather than being pumped in the same temperature. Not that being pumped at the same temperature as the primary fluid, as we saw in sketch A. In sketch C, this is the transcritical state. Here, the trans C. So this is the low stage, and this is the higher stage on top. And they are, the working fluid goes through subcritical and supercritical. So CO2 is first boiled and expanded in a superheated vapor in an evaporator. Then a compressor, another compressor here, is used to increase the pressure of the superheated fluid. So these are used these transcritical systems are used in commercial and small systems. However, compressors do exist actually for industrial applications. Now, if we look at the two refrigerants that are being used for refrigeration and in fisheries, we find that CO2 is suitable for freezer system because of its positive pressure up to -56 degrees Celsius. And the gas is extremely dense, giving high rates of heat transfer. The pressure drops are also favorable at low temperature. And so the freezer systems have been found to be more efficient than any other alternative, including ammonia. And this is in the Refrigeration Technical Options Report of TEEP of 2018, which you can also refer to. In higher temperatures, such as cold storage, ammonia cascade systems are likely to be slightly less efficient than a two-stage ammonia, but more efficient than other systems using like glycol, brine, or other heat transfer. So the major challenge is that the operating pressure is approximately 120 bar and requires skilled labor for installation and maintenance. Now, the hydrocarbons, they are flammable, but however, if we take the proper precautions, the consequences of flammability can be reduced. And also if we follow the standards. So they are miscible with mineral oils, and they have relatively high critical temperatures, which is applicable for high ambient areas like Oman. So propane, which is hydrocarbon 290 or R290, and propylene, which is 1270, have boiling points below 40 degrees C, minus 40, and unsuitable for refrigeration. Their thermophysical properties match those of 22. They're very similar to 22. As a matter of fact, in air conditioning, some of them, some applications, some countries have been replacing 22 with 290, and which is a little bit of a dangerous practice. High coefficient of performance, COP, and they're also used as secondary fluids to manage the charge limits. They are used with secondary fluids to manage the charge limits. So the standards for flammable refrigerants, there you have standards if the refrigerant is used within the space, and this is according to the volume of the space. However, if the refrigerant is not used within a confined space, then you can go to higher charges. Now, the other trend in the emerging technologies are the HFOs, or the hydrofluoroolefins. They still contain the fluorine atom. However, the double carbon atom makes it less stable, and hence it does not stay long in the atmosphere, and having lower GWP. They have zero ODP and low GWP. However, the breakdown products of HFOs have a negative effect on the environment. So just quickly here about the HFOs that are being used now. The most known are the 1234YF, which is used as a replacement for 134A in mobile air conditioning, also in commercial refrigeration. The GWP is 4. 134A has about a GWP of 1,340, but it's mildly flammable. Mildly flammable from the classification on A to L means it is flammable. However, the speed of propagation of the flame is low, and it also needs a high intensity of spark in order to ignite. The disadvantage is that it degrades into trifluoroacetic acid, TFA, which is not readily biodegradable, and it's toxic to marine life. The 1234ZE has a GWP of 7, also mildly flammable, the same. It's a medium pressure, and it has been used in chillers, also in Cascade Systems with CO2. The HCFO, here we have a chlorine atom, 1233ZDE, is a replacement for 123 and the low pressure applications in centrifugal chillers. The GWP is 1, although it has a chlorine atom, the ODP is also very, very low. And then you have the 1244YZ, which is a class A1, so it's non-flammable, and it's medium pressure refrigerant used also for centrifugal chillers. Its GWP is 1. So in that case, it's a good alternative, and it's compatible with most oils and elastomers. So there are blends, the blends of, as we said, the HFOs with for instance, with either 32 or with other HFCs. They're having lower GWP. The 514A is also used for centrifugal chillers with 123. The 450 is used as a replacement, and it's zeotropic refrigerant, which means that it has different boiling points, so it has glide. So it's a blend of 134A with the 1234ZE. And GWP is 547. It is higher, but it's still within the, as we said, the 650 range. The 513 is azeotropic. It means they have the same boiling temperature, and it has a GWP of 573. It's non-flammable, and it's a replacement for 134A. You have also the 454C, which is used for medium temperature commercial applications, also in industrial applications for refrigeration. The GWP F140 is below the 150 limit of the F gases regulation in Europe. And the 454B is also zeotropic with glide, but GWP 450, it's being adopted now in air conditioning applications. So let us look at the resume of the refrigerants by application, from residential refrigeration, commercial refrigeration, all the way to mobile. And here you will get this table. So running out of time, I'm not going to go through each one of them. As you can see, we have classified these as alternatives to 22, alternatives to 410A and the mainly air conditioning applications. This is the medium pressure, this is the high pressure, alternatives for 134A in refrigeration, and alternatives for 404. But here you would see that most would work for, all of them would work for alternatives for both of these refrigerants. And this table here gives you a listing of natural refrigerants and synthetic refrigerants, including HFOs, according to their GWP classification. You have the safety classification. B is toxic, A1 is non-flammable, A2L is mildly flammable, and A3 is highly flammable. And this is the boiling point, which gives you an idea about the usage, whether it's for cold stores, for chillers, or for other applications. These are the medium GWP that are being used here somehow. So a conversion from 22 to CO2 is unlikely because of the pressure of the system. However, you can use it in a cascade. You can, if you have a 22, you can introduce CO2 as a cascade. Conversion to ammonia from 22 is not possible because, as we said, of copper. Conversion to hydrocarbons is feasible. However, to comply with safety code, the use of the system is not over retrofitted, because you have to make sure that the system is spark-proof, and it's designed for flammability. And the conversion to HFOs is also not very possible because of the the glide and the fractionation that can happen because of that. And the fisheries sector, I'd like to tell you here, it's all in the report, but we have classified the applications between cold stores, small cold stores, and large cold stores, what is currently used, the medium GWP alternatives, and the lower GWP alternatives for the two classifications. We've done the same for the fish processing, whether it's a small facility or large facility. Why are we making that distinction? Because in a smaller facility, the charge limits for hydrocarbons can be used, while here you will see that it's mostly ammonia and CO2 that's being used. For the vessels, CO2 is being used, and as well as HFOs, although they're multi-flammable, but they're used in cascade systems. But hydrocarbons, as pure hydrocarbons, are not used in vessels. The other industrial, and this is not, it is in the report, but it's not of concern for you, maybe, for your offices and so on. So, we have the emerging refrigerants, and we have classified that in small chillers, medium-sized chillers, or large chillers, and even large chillers with the centrifugal compressor and low pressure and medium pressure. And you have all the alternatives here. This is the not-in-kind, which is the absorption, does not use refrigerants, uses water, and does not use a lot of electricity, only the electricity to run the pump. However, it needs a source of heat. I apologize for running through this. We will have in the next session, you'll have the chance to ask questions, and also we would like to ask your opinion about certain things.
Thank you, Yunhui. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Bassam. Can you move to the next slide, please, Yunhui? So yes, now we will have a look here at the financing and partnering opportunities for companies in the government to encourage the transition to alternative technologies. So we've grouped them in several categories. So the first opportunities are government-based. So for example, incentives. So government incentive can play a key role in encouraging end users to transition to environmentally alternatives in the refrigeration and air conditioning and fisheries sectors. Example of incentive can include acquisition of equipment, capital grant to companies investing in alternative technologies, tax incentive, exemption or reduction of tax on alternative technologies, loan guarantee to invest in alternative technologies. But beside incentives, you also have disincentives that can be put in place by the government and play a key role in accompanying the phase down or phase out of specific technologies. Examples are ODS or GWP weighted taxes on technology, selected ban on ODS high GWP technologies, extended producer responsibility schemes on appliances. So those are a few examples of government disincentive. There could be also opportunities with the Oman Development Bank Industrial Projects Loan. So the Oman Development Bank is the main development financing institutions in the country. And the Industrial Project Loans Programs is a program that provides small and medium-sized enterprises with financial assistance and working capital for development activities, including in the fisheries sectors. So that could be one possibility. The second category of financing and partnering opportunities are business-based. The first one would be, for example, bank loans. Some banks are providing fisheries finance, in which activities included aquaculture and commercial fisheries. Could be also fisheries development Oman, which is a subsidiary of the sovereign wealth fund Oman Investment Authority. The company invests in fisheries and aquaculture projects and could be a driver for transition, showing best practices to the larger fisheries sectors. Another opportunity that was mentioned, we mentioned those companies at the really beginning of the session today. FAS Trading, which is a company of the refrigeration and air conditioning servicing sectors in Oman, was supported by UNIDO to establish a reclamation center in its premises. And the company Genetco and Bawan Engineering Company also received recycling and recovery equipment this year. So increased recovery, recycling, and reclaiming of refrigerant from fisheries and users could improve the financial sustainability of the sectors and its ability to transition to alternative technologies. Another opportunity could be cooperative or other form of business organization, which can be a way of maximizing long-term benefits to deal with the difficulties of fisheries management and make the necessary investment in infrastructures and machines to transition to alternatives. The third category will be the reliance on financial markets to make a transition to alternative technologies. For example, sustainable bonds, which are bonds intended to encourage sustainability and to support climate-related and other types of special environmental projects. The finance projects aimed at energy efficiency, for example, pollution prevention, sustainable agriculture and fisheries, the protection of aquatic and territorial ecosystem, among others. They also finance the development of environmentally friendly technologies and the mitigation of climate change. So that's one possibility with the financial markets. Most of us here, I think, know very well the next opportunities. For example, bilateral collaboration with ProClima, for example. ProClima is a program of the German Development Agency, GIZ, promoting integrated ozone and climate protections in the cooling sector worldwide, focusing on the use of natural refrigerants and foam blowing agents. ProClima is active in the field of fisheries and sustainable refrigeration, in particular through the Green Cooling Initiative, GCI. Next, please. Yeah, GCI, well, I think it was hidden on the previous slide, but also GCI is the Green Cooling Initiative that supports several projects to transition to alternative technologies in fisheries and fish processing factories. Another kind of cooperation that would be possible is multilateral. So for that, we have obviously the Multilateral Fund for the Implementation of the Montreal Protocol, which provides assistance notably to Oman through this project. but also provide financial and technical assistance to developing countries for them to comply with the measure of the Montreal Protocol. The MLF has been supporting several projects and activities in the fisheries sectors. Besides this project in Oman, there are also other projects, for example, in the Maldives, in Fiji, and to a lesser extent in Costa Rica, Madagascar, and also St. Kitts and Nevis, for example. Still in the multilateral collaboration, we have the Kigali Cooling Efficient Program, that is a development initiative supporting projects that lead to faster implementation of efficient, clean cooling, and that mobilize additional resources of public and private investments. Another mechanism is the Global Environment Facility. So it's a multilateral financial mechanism that I think everybody knows here, that provide grants to developing countries for projects that benefit global environment and promote sustainable livelihood in local communities. It's also active on the protection of the ozone layer, energy efficiency, and sustainable fisheries. Another multilateral financial mechanism is the Green Climate Funds, established within the framework of the UNFCCC, to assist developing countries in adaptation and mitigation practices to counter climate change. The fund is also active in the field of refrigeration and energy efficiency. For example, it's supporting a project on green cooling, which aims to accelerate transition to climate-friendly and energy-efficient air conditioning. The project is called Kigali First Movers Project. Another category of possible support is professional associations. So we have the ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, which is an American professional association seeking to advance heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration system design and construction. It's active in the field of refrigeration for fisheries. In Dubai, there is the Global Training Center for Building Excellences. It delivers regular curricula-based training available and relevant to the needs of practitioners in the Middle East. So that could be an opportunity also for Oman. Next, we have also the International Institute of Refrigeration, which is an intergovernmental organization promoting knowledge in every sector of refrigeration and associated technologies and applications. It's active in the field of fisheries. And then we have the usual international partners that are UNEP, UNIDO, UNDP, and the World Bank. UNEP and UNIDO being present in this project. Thank you very much.
So now it's up to you. And today we don't have many participants, but the good news is that it's an all-female participant. So we really thank you, Yasmin and Isra, for being with us. We'd like to have an open discussion with you. In our report, we talk about some strengths and opportunities, but we also want to learn about the challenges and threats and also your needs. So very, very quickly, we know that, the economy in Oman is diverse. It has a developed academic sector. It has an abundance of marine resources and many companies, fish processing plant. You are also, Oman is also exporting fish, mostly to the GCC, but also international. And we know in the opportunities that, the equipment that you have is aging, but the sustainability factor sustainability is a factor for potential importers of Oman. So when you change your aging equipment, when you want to replace them, you need to look at sustainability because your customers are also looking at that factor. They're looking at, they want to know probably how much emissions you have in your sector and how environmentally friendly methods that you are using, whether in fishing itself or in the processing of fish. We also know that Oman is a member of the Gulf Standards Organization, and that they are developing minimum energy performance standards for energy efficiency, for air conditioners, but also some work is being done on the refrigeration project. So you have strength and you have these opportunities. So if we can please hear from you, what are some of the challenges that you see in the sector, in the fisheries sector, whether in the, concerning fisheries themselves or concerning the cold chain, the cold chain of refrigeration in the sector. So if I may please ask our two participants to share with us. I know we're putting a lot of strain on you, but if you can share some of your thoughts, we'd be really grateful. I know Yasmin Johnson, we have corresponded together. We're trying to do the survey, Guillaume and myself, and you did respond to us. But then Dr. Sabah did a much fuller survey. So would you like to say something? Maybe Alex? Yes, please, Alex.
Yes, one of the biggest concerns I have is the education and certification because we know that in countries with less well-trained or not trained at all people, we see far too many accidents, which is not necessary because it is simply because people don't know why it is. I also saw the note here that you cannot retrofit into hydrocarbons, but it also goes for the HFOs. You cannot retrofit a HFC system into a HFO system, for example, because of several reasons. One of them being the flammability of some of the HFOs, but yes, also if the codes are and the equipment is not suited for the HFO, then you cannot do it legally. Of course, from technical point of view, you can probably do it, but not from a legal point of view. And that is a risk to run. So we are talking about all new systems when we go into new retrofitted or not retrofitted into new systems and new refrigerants, because all the equipment you have, and you also said in your slide that it is aging systems, and aging systems there you didn't foresee the new refrigerants because they're really new. They are not more than 5 years old or so. So therefore, such things as gaskets, O-rings, and what have you in a system, and the oil not least, has to be changed, and it's not all straightforward. So when we go into new refrigerants, regardless what it is, then it is a big issue with lack of educated and trained people to do it. It is very important.
Thank you so much, Alex, for this very useful information, and this falls really into what our colleague Khalid has presented about the certification scheme that UNEP is introducing into the GCC and in Oman in particular. Well, if we don't want to put too much pressure on the participants from the sector, so if there is no input into this, Guillaume, can I ask you what are some of the challenges that you have seen while preparing? Or Khalid? Yeah. Khalid, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bassam. Thank you very much, colleagues, also for the excellent presentations. It has been very informative to me personally, even though I know the country. I worked in Oman for a number of years. I think it's worth to investigate the figures from the sector, especially in terms of consumption and leak rates, because it's striking me when we see this to 170% leakage. I think maybe it's worth to reinvestigate. Maybe this is number one. And number two, I don't think that, taking into account the growth over the past few years in the catch or the produce from the fisheries, that all cold chain related to the sector are aging. So maybe also we need to have a clear picture about the setup of the refrigeration and cold stores under this sector in terms old and the new. Why the growth in the consumption of R22 based technologies is related to lack of government policies or for something else, technology or lack of knowledge. So maybe these are critical elements to be taken into account in the future plan for the fisheries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khaled. Thank you. It's definitely important to understand more what's happening. Dr. Sabah had tried in her survey to cover most of the aspects. I believe, we would look also at the year of installation. I think that was one of the requirements, if I remember correctly. However, I remember from 2014, the most of the equipment were 22, and in this 7 years, let's say, the change to 404A is really incredible. Now the leakage in the 404A leads me to think that maybe, I don't know if it's a practice in Oman, in some countries we have seen in Africa, some of the equipment, that even the new equipment is imported secondhand. I hope it's not a practice in Oman, and I don't think it is. But what we see it in other countries, and it's the case of dumping. The industrialized world wants to get rid of their 404 equipment because of the phase down of the HFCs, and because they cannot be used in some of the countries. So they find markets where regulation is missing, whether it's regulation about import of equipment or the regulation regarding the energy efficiency, and they dump this equipment there. So thanks for bringing this up, Khalid. Guillaume, you wanted to share with us, please, some of the challenges, maybe?
Sure. Thank you, Bassam. But some of the challenges we identify completely echo the comments just made by Khaled and Alex. For example, the lack of up-to-date data on end users, so the need, for example, to double check the consumption and leakage rates that we found in the fishery sector. Another possible weakness that we identify is the absence of, or at least the need for more training and for more education of fishermen and refrigerants and technicians working in the fisheries. So possibly the creation of institute or training school could be something beneficial. But among the other challenges and weaknesses that we've identified, maybe what we saw was the lack of availability of alternative and equipment using them on the market, or the lack, as I mentioned in my presentation, the lack of safety and energy standards, which could drive a transition, or the lack of field assessment of actual conditions in Oman on the suitability of alternatives. Maybe another aspect we identified was the lack of destruction facility for wasted refrigerants. So here are a few points that we identified in our survey.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. I just want to remind here that there's a kind note from Khaled saying, I wish to remind all that retrofitting of systems with the hydrocarbon are not recommended due to safety considerations. So apologies if I gave the wrong impression.
Mr. Lasad?
Yes.
Because I raised my hand from long time. Maybe you
I'm sorry.
Don't worry about that. Could I add some point about the challenge in this sector, because we are facing all the challenges here. Maybe the main thing, the low training for the worker in the sector, so they can't dealing with the new equipment, the new gases. This, I think, the main thing we're facing in this sector. Also, I think the other appointment for that, the suitable equipment who can dealing with the Oman condition, and the Gulf country have special condition. to dealing with the equipment who can work in other country, but unfortunately it can't work in our country. I think their main point which facing in this sector.
Thank you very much. They are definitely valid points. And my apologies again for not.
Don't worry about that.
I saw your hand, but we needed to get you. So we appreciate your intervention, Mr. Salim. And regarding the applicability of the equipment, you are right. The Oman condition. Oman is one of the countries which are high ambient countries.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, HAT countries. They are also for the Kigali Amendment. They are in Group 2, which is a later phase down. So instead of starting in 2024, it's starting 2028. Now, with this, Yondowi, I turn it to you. I believe that this concludes our presentation and discussion session.
Thank you, Bassam. Yeah, thank you all of you again. I think today's meeting is very productive meeting, and thank you all of you again for attending this meeting. And the time is also we already run over the time. I just want to give a brief recap what we discussed today with 4 points. Firstly, I think as we discussed, the IPMP Stage 2 goes very well in Oman, in particular, the Bayan-E listening system, and also the national certification system, as well as the 3R program. This ensures the government of Oman to comfortably achieve its targets before 2020. Secondly, I fully agree with you. The fishery sector is very important sector for Oman to realize their IPMP targets in the country, especially in the future. Thirdly, I want to highlight that their emerging technology with their non-ODP and the low GWP are available for the different applications in the sector. For example, ammonia technology, hydrocarbon technology, HFO technology. And also their emergency technology have some advantage, not only avoiding the emission of their but also will saving their spendings on electricity because their energy efficiency. But of course, I also agree with you that we should pay more attention regarding their application of their new technologies, especially their sufficient technical assistance, including the training and also proper selection, proper suitable equipment, and also regarding their application of the technologies. So last but not least, I also would like to say that now UNIDO also jointly work with UN Environment to develop their IPMP Stage 3 in cooperation with their National Ozone Unit. In the new stage, we will support the government to meet the target of 2030. This means 100% reduction of ICFC consumption in the country, except for 2.5% of the servicing tail. So, I mean, this is a lot of challenges in their front, but also we see a lot of opportunities shared by during the discussion section. I really appreciate your support, for the implementation of the Stage 2, but also I'm looking forward to continue cooperate with all of you for the new stage. So this is my wording for their warm up. Again, I also I would like to appreciate your time for attending this meeting again. Yeah, I hope we can meet again soon.